say that's what it takes to be a top 30.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I haven't looked at that in a while.
And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very, very high above all the puerile, bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Number 28 on the feed spot list of the 100 podcasts you should be listening to. 28, Ken, not 30 anymore. 28.
Well, congratulations. That's pretty cool. I'm sitting here, you say behind, firmly ensconced behind the silver microphone. I thought, well, that's where it starts. and then there's a lot more other stuff you got to get.
That's true. Go ahead and throw my screen up there just so our viewers can see this. There we go. All right. So this is the feed spot, top 100, and you can see Cowboy State Politics is at number 28. And Scott Jennings, the guy the lone conservative on CNN, he's number 29. And the truth is, he and I have kind of been right in the same ballpark the entire time this list has been put together. So I'm going to reach out to him and see if he wants to do a show.
You should scroll up from there a little bit and just show some of the names that are up there. I mean, there's a little bit of a gap there.
Tom Fitton,
big time.
National Review. There's a couple of others that you may not be familiar with, but up here at the top. And by the way, I think it's an honor to even be on the same list as some of these people.
Yeah.
The Charlie Kirk Show, number 10. Mark Levin, Ted Cruz, Steve Deace, he's on the Blaze. Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, Allie Beth Stuckey, Ben Shapiro. So pretty auspicious list.
It's also, when you get to that point, it's pretty crowded.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good competition. It's hard to move up very far, very fast. But you started out at 36, and now we're 28.
28, right? And again, this came as a complete surprise to me. Christine and I were on one of our weekend getaways, and I happened to pull up my email, and here's this email from the FeedSpot Top 100. Congratulations! So pretty cool. Another thing that I found this morning that I just wanted to share with you, since we're talking about the program, is I found a picture of a podcast with Mike Rowe. Mike Rowe is the guy that does Mike Rowe Works, Dirty Jobs, those sorts of things. And I just wanted to show you the picture, and then we're going to show you what Ken's desk looks like. So show this. So there's the board there on the right-hand side of the screen. You can see a couple of laptops. Over in the left-hand corner, you'll see the switcher gizmo, and that's one of the things that switches between camera views. And then, of course, the monitor. So there's the one, and that's the show Mike Rowe is on. Now go ahead and show him our view, Ken. All right, so there you go. There's a couple of laptops, the board, the Zoom with what is that one? The 12? The P12?
Yeah, this one's an L12.
L12, that's what it is.
Yeah, P stands for pretty crappy.
Yeah, well, that's my
But the
P8.
L is only merely lousy. No, actually, it's a very nice board. It's kind of a mix between a manual and a digital.
Yeah, pretty nice equipment. But anyway, then you can see the stack over behind Ken and then the video monitor. So all that to say that, yep, kind of doing the same stuff as all the other folks, which is far better than just about any of the other so-called podcasts in the Cowboy State, which is why we're number 28 and they're not. All right, my friends. So last night.
Wait a second.
Yes.
You're not being fair to yourself.
I'm not?
This stuff, all of this stuff, isn't why we're number 28.
No. It's just, and in a comparison, right?
Yeah, you're a big part of the reason.
Well,
and I was just
it
thinking
is.
this morning, we have this symbiotic relationship here where I couldn't do what I love to do without somebody people wanted to listen to.
Right.
And you couldn't reach the astounding heights.
The astounding heights.
Yeah. It's interesting you picked Mike Rowe's studio, because those of you who listen, don't be surprised if one day before long, Mike Rowe is sitting here with us.
It's a distinct possibility. Just saying, might happen. All right, so yesterday, and today's going to be kind of a little bit of a different program for you, because yesterday we had the opportunity, I don't even know if it's an opportunity, yeah, I guess so, to sit down with Representative Mike Yin and Representative Karlee Provenza, two of the top Democrats in the Wyoming legislature. They happened to be in town for a town hall listening session that they held last night, and my awesome producer, Agent 29, convinced them to sit down in the studio with us for the better part of an hour. And it's a pretty wide-ranging discussion. And I better turn that off. There we go. And we covered a lot of different topics, but it is definitely one of those interviews where I just let them talk for the most part. And, I firmly believe that if you let somebody talk long enough, they will tell you exactly what you need to know about them. And that's precisely what happened yesterday. And so it's a long interview, but if you listen to them, wow, you learn so much about where the Democrats are coming from.
Yeah, and I think you need to bear in mind that while they were here, there was kind of a toned down, they knew they were in not really hostile territory. You can tell that we weren't hostile toward each other.
Yeah.
In fact, I appreciate them because they're willing to tell you who they are.
Oh, yeah.
But they did. They kind of tone it back a little bit. But last night, I guess they were a little more in their element, or at least
Yes.
the people that support them were in their element. And tell us a little bit, if you would.
So you'll hear during the interview that they're in town for one of their listening sessions. They've been traveling around the state, putting on these town halls. And the ostensible purpose is to listen to what Wyoming citizens are concerned about. Well, their Sheridan County, Johnson County version of that was held at Kearney Hall, which is an interesting place. It's an old dance hall that's between Story and Buffalo. It's actually kind of a cool place. It's an old building, and sometimes during the summer they actually do have dances there. Your old style. You think about the high school dances you went to. They're kind of fun to go to. But anyway, that's where it was at. And there were a couple of Republicans there. I went just to see what the heck was going to go on, and a couple of comments about that. They did serve dinner, though. Don't worry, my friends, I did not eat any of it, and they did have some, water and iced tea, and I did not partake of any of that because I assume that you have to become a Democrat somehow, and I'm pretty sure it involves drinking the Kool-Aid or iced tea or eating something there. So I made sure not to go anywhere near that, even though they did have some very yummy-looking cookies. I mean, they have to entice you to become a Democrat somehow, so it always starts there and then goes elsewhere. But last night, there were, as I counted, technically 5 Republicans there, including myself. Now, the press, man, there was a lot of press there. There was the Sheridan Compress. There was somebody from the Buffalo Bullcrap, and Wildfile was there. You can't get a single person from the Wyoming media to show up at a Republican event, but a bunch of Democrats throw a shindig, and yeah, they're all there. But to their word, Representative Yin and Provenza didn't say a whole heck of a lot. They had people separated into different groups of 8 different, discussion groups. And while I was there, I didn't stay for the whole thing. I could only take about an hour of it, and then I had to get out of there. But they asked a couple questions, and then you discuss it amongst the group. And I can tell you for a fact, my friends, we're not miles away from your typical everyday Democrat. We are chasms away. The stuff I heard last night, crazy stuff like universal basic income and eliminating all school choice. And apparently everybody's coming for federal lands, and that's the chief concern among. I mean, it was truly amazing to listen to one of the to listen to all those Democrats talk. And at one point, one of the questions was, what keeps you up at night? And not a single person, not a single one of the spokespeople anyway, said, I'm worried about us shooting each other over politics. Not one, not even got close to that. Now, at our table, I mentioned, hey, one of the things that keeps me up at night is, will we actually be able to talk to one another? Can we have an intelligent, calm discussion like we did yesterday? And I think the interview I'm going to play for you here in just a little bit will prove that we can have a discussion. But that was the only part that was brought up last night. Nobody said anything about, people are getting assassinated and they tried to kill the president. There was none of that last night.
Yeah, we can have a calm discussion, but to what end when you start to realize how far apart we really are? So as I went through and reviewed this from a technical aspect last night and listened to it, and having worked with Karlee for the last 3 years, having worked with Mike, I know where they're at. And as you listen to this, you think, oh, somebody should have said. We wanted to hold back and let them hang themselves, so to speak. And they didn't particularly do that here. But if you take some of the roads that they start to go down to their ultimate ends, you end up in not a good place, in my view.
Well, there are a couple of prominent things, and you'll see this in the discussion. But one of them was, we have to fully fund education. And Ken and I repeatedly said, now, wait a minute. We spend over $20,000 per student. If you go over to Claremont, we spend about in excess of $40,000 per student. So please, if you're saying we're not fully funding education, what's the number? I mean, how much money do we have to dump into it? And they would not answer the question.
20,000 is just a number until you put it in perspective. But if you look at other states, even some neighboring states,
South Dakota is a great example.
Half of what we do per student.
Yeah.
And get virtually the same results, which are crappy results. I think I read, they're thumping their chest because 65% of the kids in 8th grade could come out at that level.
Yeah, I mean,
65% is a failing grade when I was in school.
It's really mediocre. I mentioned South Dakota. They're a great example. They spend around $13,000 per student, and their test scores, I think if you look at the NAEP, they're always 2 or 3 steps above Wyoming, which is still not saying a whole heck of a lot. Like Agent 29 said, that you're still kind of the cream of the crap. But they wouldn't answer the question about that. And another one, too, that they really avoided was, hey, so explain to me why that's the proper role of government. You'll hear me ask that question several times and never really got an answer out of that. And in fact, at one point, I think we were talking about healthcare. And one of them, I don't remember if it was Karlee or Mike, said, we really didn't come prepared to talk about that. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. There's also, the reason that the government should do it is because nobody else is doing it.
That's
and
not.
We kind of flipped that argument around and said the reason nobody else is doing it is because they expect government to do it. But yet you have to watch. I'm wondering, David, if we should kick one of these commercial breaks out of the way, pay some bills before we.
We probably should. So let's go ahead and do our first break. And then what we'll do, I've got a couple more comments about the interview, and then we'll go ahead and play it. And we'll probably stop in the middle of it just so we can kind of take a break and discuss what was going on.
Get our breath.
Yeah, get our breath a little bit. So go ahead and play our first break, and then we'll play the first part of the interview. Back in a minute.
Everybody say, hey, now it's gone away. Rocks now, damn, nothing left.
It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listen to the president just a little bit too closely and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy state politics is only going to continue to expand. This program, number 28 on the list of the 100 podcasts you should be listening to in 2025. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Cowboy State Politics Live on a Thursday. Now, if you've been listening to the show already, or if you just joined us, here in just a second, we're going to hit play on an interview we did yesterday with Representative Mike Yin and Karlee Provenza. Actually got him in the studio. Good job, Agent 29. I think it was a good opportunity to sit down and listen to what a couple of Democrats think. And as I mentioned before, a lot of times if you let people talk long enough, they will tell you exactly who they are. And that's what happened yesterday.
I just wanted to point out I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Thought
it was fun.
It was good to have a frank discussion. I hope they'll come back. I think they will.
I think so.
And hopefully we could dig into some of these things a little bit deeper. But here's what we got.
Yeah,
I guess.
go ahead and hit play on it. And then we'll stop about halfway. As you know, on Cowboy State Politics, I often talk about legislative ratings, where it's a big thing with us Republicans. We always want to know who the most conservative of legislator is. And according to WyoVote, the top five, and Ken, go ahead and throw this up on the screen. The top five are Chip Nyman, John Winter, Ken Clouston, J.D. Williams, and number 5 is Mike Yin. Mike, it's almost like you're one of us, sort of.
What does that rating mean? I don't even know what it means. Is it accurate if I'm number 5?
Well, I'll explain what happened, but first let me welcome my guests. I have with us in the studio Representative Mike Yin from Jackson and Representative Karlee Provenza from Laramie. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
First thing everybody gets asked on my show is why don't you just take a minute or two and tell my audience about yourself?
Sorry, Karlee, I misspelled your name.
So I'm Representative Mike Yin. I represent House District 16. So House District 16 is about 80% of the town of Jackson, only within the town border, so nothing outside of the town. Been the representative there since 2018. So going on 7 years now, which feels really weird. Decided to run because I wanted to contribute to my community. And, you know, I had been doing some nonprofit work, volunteering in town, but I figured if I want to stay in Wyoming, I should contribute to Wyoming. And so whether it was the community or the state, didn't really matter, but got more involved with state stuff. In 2018, when my state rep ran for state senate, I decided to put my hat in the ring for state rep, and it's been like that since.
Excellent. Well, welcome to the show. Karlee, what about you?
I am Karlee Provenza. I am the minority whip. I reside in Laramie, Wyoming, and that's House District 45. So anywhere from the river to 15th Street, which includes parts of the university. I serve on the Joint Agriculture Committee and the Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife Committee at this time. I'm serving in my third term right now, and I'm the second, or the other KP, maybe the better KP in the House, to my friend Ken.
So, Karlee, one question I've been dying to ask you is, what the heck is in experimental psychology? Because you have a PhD in it,
yes,
right?
This is a
What
great
is that?
question. Yeah, depending on who I'm talking to, it changes, because the formal name of what I got my degree in is experimental psychology, but I have an emphasis in psychology and the law. Experimental psychology is different than clinical psychology, where I'd have maybe the stereotypical couch in my office and I would ask you questions. Experimental psychology is running experiments and what people think and changing variables. So I did research on policing and how the public viewed law enforcement, and I looked at jury decision making. So my research was, if these conditions exist, how do people view it in the legal system? So yeah, that's the gist of it.
Excellent. Well, the main reason why I wanted to have you two on the program is I think that we ought to all be adults and be able to sit down in a room and have a discussion, even though we might disagree on just about everything. I think we can all agree that there is a veritable lack of that going on right now. And so I thought we'd just have you on the show, talk about what you're doing up here in Sheridan, and we'll just see where the conversation goes.
Yeah, we wanted you to feel comfortable, so I brought a sofa in. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that, Ken.
Yeah.
All right. So to answer your question, Mike, how did you end up on the top of the WyoVote list? So this is a pretty accurate reflection. And Ken, if you throw it back up there just for a second. This is a pretty accurate reflection of what happened last session with the supplemental budget, because there wasn't a lot of really, Democrat stuff that hit the floor. So you didn't get a chance to vote on that. You're obviously not going to vote for a lot of the more conservative stuff. And then when we started cramming different spending measures into different bills, you didn't vote a lot on those either. And so on any of these rating sites, if you end up voting no a lot, you're going to end up being more conservative than your colleagues. So that's why you're number 5 on the list.
So it's a reflection of who votes no the most.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
Okay.
In this one.
Okay.
All right. So let's get to the reason why I wanted to have you on. I mean, you guys are up here doing a tour of the state. Why don't you tell me what that's all about?
Sure, yeah. So, I think going into this next session, what we really wanted to think about, and something that I don't think we've done as Democrats as long as I've been in office, is really just kind of get a pulse of what everyone in Wyoming thinks, right? So as state representatives, we are representative of our district, but we also make decisions that cover the entire state. So as a body of the House of Representatives, I mean, we should try to focus on what the priorities of the entire state want us to work on. And so I think basically the crux of the sessions is to figure out, okay, folks on the ground, tell us what your issues are, tell us what your problems are. We want to hear from you guys, not just our own districts. What are the things that we should work on? What are the things that keep you up at night? What are the things that Wyoming needs to solve?
All right. What's the turnout been like?
Turnout's been pretty great. We had over 100 people in Cheyenne, about 70 in Casper, 80 in Lander, and 40 or so in Rock Springs, I think.
Yeah, Rock Springs was the lowest so far, but we're excited about Sheridan.
Okay. Well, I guess the next logical question is, so what are you hearing? What are the priorities that you've heard?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people care about the same thing, regardless of their political background. They want to make sure that they can take care of their families. They want to make sure that they have good jobs, that their communities are thriving. And so, some of the big things that we've heard a lot about, and Ken, you'll appreciate this from the Recal Committee. People are concerned about public education funding after that lawsuit. They're concerned about ensuring that they have access to health care. There's a lot of people right now that are struggling with being able to afford to go to the doctor. And then the other thing that we've heard about is property taxes, and maybe different.
Obviously,
yeah, maybe
clearly.
different in the way that you would think. And there's difference of opinion, obviously, but we're hearing from people that are concerned that they're not going to have the same services if we cut. So they're worried about what that 50% tax cut could look like if that passes on the ballot. Is there anything else I missed on
I
there?
think you forgot what's on your sweater.
Oh, obviously.
That's your big thing.
Public land,
Karlee.
yeah. I mean, usually when I say who I am, I say I'm Karlee Provenza. I'm a public landowner, and so are all of the people that show up at these things. So we're hearing about public lands and concerns about are we good stewards of the land and making sure that we don't sell them.
Yeah, and so it's not there. There are different communities that have some different things that they've brought up to us, but what we're trying to get is like, what are the priorities that are through lines throughout the entire state? So what is every community telling us that is exactly the same?
All right.
But also keeping track of all of those other things too.
Okay, well, let's start out with the one you brought up, Karlee. So public lands. Now, you and I have had a conversation before that one of the big problems in Wyoming is that we have a checkerboard of, public land, private land, state. Well, I guess state is public land.
Yeah.
And then you add on top of it the corner crossing problem. What's the solution?
Well, I think right now, we have a system that I know some folks struggle with because it's bureaucratic, but I think it protects public land, like keeping our public lands. The checkerboard, I think, just depends on the community, right? Like there are some areas where maybe we can swap some checkerboard so that we have more contiguous or more like just together pieces of public land, right? So you have more access. You don't have to worry so much about corner crossing. When it comes to corner crossing, I believe that the people of Wyoming should be able to access that public land if they are just stepping from one corner to the next. You're not hurting anything. It's your public land. You should have access to be on that. And that's something that we've heard pretty widespread from folks, is that they support the ability to cross from one corner of public land to the next without doing any harm to any private property rights.
See, and the argument against that is that and it's twofold. First, that you have no idea whether you're actually on that corner or you're not, and it's a technology problem, right? Your cell phone is not accurate enough to tell you where you're at. You could be on the corner, you could be 10 feet from it, and then you step across, and you might be stepping on private land. So there's one problem with it. And then the second argument against that is that it is never going to stop at just stepping across it. Like it'll start there, and then it'll be a ladder, and then it'll be a gate, and then you'll have a 10-foot wide road. And so, I'm interested in the solution that protects private property rights, but also protects, access to private land. Let me ask you guys this. And I probably already know the answer to this, but what'd you think of Mike Lee's proposal to sell private land that's adjacent to communities?
You mean sell public land?
Excuse me. Yeah, public land. Sorry.
So one, I think that I'm glad that we agree that there's a problem of accessing public land, and if we haven't figured out the solution of how we protect private landowners as well, I think that's something that we can work on, right? But being able to agree that we have a shared problem that we need to solve. And then two, I think Mike Lee was not necessarily honest about what he was trying to do, right? So I think, and because he said this, right? He said that he doesn't think the federal government should own any land, right? And so his goal to sell private land and then just say it's for housing, it seems disingenuous when he's previously said that he's wanted to get rid of all federal land holdings at all. So I think that if it was something like, let's ask the federal government if they could focus on land swaps throughout the checkerboard, I think you'd get more support for that, right? But if you're just saying, we should just sell private land, we're not going to put any boundaries other than say it's going to be near communities and quote unquote for housing, that's going to get less public support than saying we need to increase access to the existing public lands we have with land swaps. That could benefit everybody.
Yeah, I have a big problem anytime I hear the phrase affordable housing. Ken, what do you got?
So I grew up in the Bighorn Basin part of the time and part of the time here in Sheridan. And they're very different places. If you want to go find access public land here, you've got to know landowners because a lot of it is isolated, or if you don't know the landowners, if you don't have friends like that, you basically don't get out. In the Bighorn Basin, we could take off from the house and just, whether horseback or ATVs or whatever, and just go forever. And that kind of freedom is unheard of, especially in the lower 48. So I'm particularly, I guess you would say, agitated or excited about this issue. I don't know all the right answers. I have known some landowners who have had some lands, frankly, trashed by people coming through and taking advantage of it. It only takes a couple of bad apples. They always say spoils the whole bunch. So I don't know what all the best answers are, but I know we need to be looking, and I appreciate everybody having the discussion. What I would like to see, and you guys feel free to comment on this, I don't think the federal government should own any lands either. I happen to believe the Constitution, the way that it was written.
Does.
And I would like to see those lands be ceded into state control. For one thing, we as state legislators are much more accessible to the population and much easier to reach us than somebody in Washington. We also live here with these people. We understand the particulars of our neighborhoods. And I think we would be much better stewards of these public lands than the federal government has been. I'd appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah, I want to touch on a couple things. The land close to town. I saw some big bucks on some land close to town. Some
There's
hunters
one wandering around here. Sheridan.
Yeah, I'm sure there are a few of them, right? So I know some sportsmen that take issue with this idea of these lands close to town, and I would as well. When it comes to the state being potentially better stewards of the land, I'll just pose this question. I mean, we have a constitutional mandate to fully fund education, and we don't do that. We have right now less than 1 million acres of state lands in this state. I don't believe that the state of Wyoming right now wants to fund management of these lands in a way that would take care of them and keep the people of Wyoming happy. And we have a state constitutional mandate that says that we have to make money off those lands. So if we're not making sure that we're making money off of them, then they have to go up for sale. And so to me, they're not any different. You talk about public land transfer to the states, we're still talking about public land sale, except it's just a little bit more dishonest.
Yeah, and I don't know that I would go, to say that it's dishonest, because Ken, I think you brought up a good point that the Constitution is pretty clear about what parcels of land the federal government can own, and okay, so it doesn't specifically say you can't own this, but it lists out, and I forget the phraseology of it, but it's like forts, garrisons, ports, and there's a small list there. But we're so far away from the state controlling land. All the federal land. Wyoming, 46% of the land in Wyoming is owned by the federal government. And I think that we're so far removed from that possibility. And at one time, the federal government, it was somebody at the BLM that said, well, the state of Wyoming couldn't possibly pay to manage all of that property. Well, the BLM doesn't do anything with it anyway. If it transfers, then you got oil and gas leases. I want to ask you about something you just said, Karlee, that we don't fully fund education right now. Can you explain that?
Well, we've been sued 4 times because the legislature continues not to fund a quality, equitable education across the state of Wyoming. Ken's working on that problem right now in terms of recalibration, what that looks like. We did bring an amendment after that lawsuit went through. So I think, you could say that we're funding education now, but under court order, essentially. So, I mean, and what we're hearing at these listening sessions, to come back to that too, is that we have teachers that the teacher pay might need to might need to go up. We need to make sure that we're ensuring that the kids in our rural areas of Wyoming are also getting the same education, right? That's part of what our Constitution mandates.
All right. Well, if you look at some of our rural schools, and we'll use Claremont, Arvada, for example, if you do the math, they receive about around $40,000 per student. Statewide, the numbers, 21?
2021, it depends on who you ask. That's one of the frustrating things about the way we do things in Wyoming is it's very hard to get a clear-cut answer.
Yeah,
But
it's
about
around
21,000.
It's around $20,000 per student. So the question is, if we aren't fully funding it, what's the number?
I mean, that's what recalibration is supposed to decide, right? And so the question is, can you get teachers in Arvada Claremont without paying them $40,000 per student on a per student basis? Maybe not. And so if you start shrinking the ability for these schools to even hire teachers, what keeps a kid who's growing up in a school from deciding to stay in that community? If they decide that they want to grow up, start a family, stay in Arvada or Claremont, but there's not enough teachers there to teach students, why wouldn't they choose another place to live?
So here's another tough one. We just passed a bill, it was House Bill 316, that basically instructed the school districts to give all of the staff an 8.5% raise. Only one school district in the state did that. The rest far below, and several of them gave nothing. And there has been a push for some time to be able to kind of put these in coffee cans or silos, we like to call them, so that we specify we're going to give you this money, but we want to make sure that what we're spending here actually goes to the teachers. It goes in the form of a block grant to the school districts. They do what they want, and the teachers are getting left out in the cold.
So happy to talk about that.
Yeah. let's do it.
Also talk about what happens in Jackson with the cost of living there and how does it normally.
Yeah. So happy to talk about the amendment we passed and the raises that were given in certain places. Essentially, what school districts were doing was already trying to increase their teacher raises from above what the model allowed. And so when we gave them that 8%, it did actually go to teacher salaries, but it kind of back end funded the teacher raises from what they were front end loading with other parts of the model. And so that's how they're trying to just keep their school afloat, from making sure that they have the salaries they already had. You should take a look at where all of those teacher salaries are on average for each school compared to the model salaries.
Yeah,
I think that's a worthwhile.
you just touched on them. What I think we'll probably agree is the problem is the model sucks. I don't think the model is effectively working. The state is spending $21,000. We spend as much or more than virtually any other state in the union on education.
Pretty close.
But the model isn't working.
So the reason that is because we literally haven't passed a recalibration bill in 15 years, right? And so we've had 15 years worth of inflation, especially a lot in the last 5 to 10 years, and none of that kept up. And that's probably the biggest reason we got sued, right? Because we weren't willing as a legislature to keep up with what we had to do to keep up our education.
I mean, the problem the reason why I disagree with that, Mike, is that we already pay more than just about every other state for education. We have far fewer students, and we live in a big state and there's a lot of distance between schools, but still, I mean, I don't think that you can escape the argument that we pay over $20,000 per kid. Some schools get 40, depending on how big the school is. And then when the legislature says, hey, here's enough money for an 8.5% raise, and the bill actually says raise a couple of different times, and school districts didn't do that. And I mean, I've heard, since I broke that story, I've heard across the state from teachers that say, well, we got a measly 1.07%, and there was, in Teton County, it was 0. So I don't think that they can get around the argument saying we don't pay our teachers enough when you had the money right there and you spent it elsewhere.
I don't think the model pays for teachers enough anyway right now. There was money allocated for a raise. That raise wasn't enough. You have people that can't afford to live here.
Okay.
I mean, in this town, in Mike's town, in my town, we're talking about how do we make sure that a teacher doesn't have to work a second job to be able to keep a roof over their head. Hardworking people should be paid an honest wage.
I agree.
And
So why aren't school districts doing that?
because we have severely underfunded them and they have had to cheat the model.
Well, I mean, they had to break, right? So that you have to take away from other services to be able to pay teachers what they need to actually hire them, right? Otherwise, teachers aren't going to move to the middle of Wyoming or a small town. I mean, the easiest way that we can reduce the average amount of a per student salary is to close all the schools in small towns. But I don't want to close all the schools.
I don't think
in
that anybody
small
does.
towns. And I hope nobody does. But the fact is, if you want to get teachers in a small town in Wyoming, it costs money. And we don't have the economies of scale that a big city in almost every single other state that has more population than the entire state of Wyoming. Right?
Yeah, Wyoming costs more because we make sure that the kids that live out in the ranches in our counties have somewhere to go to school that isn't a 2 or 3 or 4 hour bus ride.
Well, and therein lies another problem, though, because the state legislature reimburses schools for all transportation costs. So none of that can even be included in my opinion, in any of the discussion about teacher salaries, because that doesn't come out of their budget. I mean, that's a reimbursed cost from the legislature.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I mean, again, I guess the question that I would continue to ask is, what's the number?
Well, but if that's the case, if what we're saying is that the transportation is reimbursed, then I could save a lot of money by closing my rural school in northern Albany County that has 2 kids in it that's costing over $100,000 a year. I mean, that's not transportation. That's that we have to have a modular at the very north end of the county so that kid doesn't have to ride a bus for 2.5 hours one way.
That's a really good point. You know, because there's a kid in Johnson County, and I only know this because my mom works at the school there, but it is more than an hour ride to school and then back again.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time that kid, you know, all the other kids are dropped off, then it's another hour on the bus, you know, by themselves. And then, of course, you know, you got to pay the bus driver. But again, you know, that's transportation. So,
Yeah, I want to throw in on this. One example that has always bothered me, Natrona County has 1 school district and I don't know how many students. Sheridan County has 3 school districts, which means 3 administrators and all of their staffs. And I believe the number is accurate that for every teacher we have 3 administrators. Dr. Seuss wrote a book called Did I ever tell you how lucky you are? And he talks about you lucky you're not the bee watcher. They had a bee in town that would go out and the townsfolk didn't think he was gathering enough honey, so they hired a bee watcher to watch the bee. And they still didn't have enough honey, so they hired a bee watcher. And you can see where this is going pretty quick. There's a long line. What I'm getting at is a lot of the money that goes to education does not go to the teacher. It goes to layers of administration. If we have, and I believe we do have, good quality professional teachers, yes, they should be paid well.
Absolutely.
And they don't need 4 layers of supervisors watching over their shoulders. That's what the school boards are for. That's what the parents are for.
So we actually talked about district consolidation 5 years ago at the last recalibration.
I think it's a good idea.
The question is, Ken, are you going to ask Sheridan County School District to dissolve one of their school districts and consolidate?
I already have.
No,
Of course,
2.
I didn't get anywhere. Yeah, 2 of them.
So, I mean, it's a hard thing, right? To tell the public that, you know, we think that east side of the county shouldn't have a school district and you should report to a school board on the west side of the county. That's hard. That's a hard thing for parents to swallow sometimes.
You know, but I think that an easier argument is someplace like Fremont County. Now, Fremont County's pretty good size, but they've got 8. And, you know, okay, so there's different constituencies in all corners of that county, but still, you know, compare the size of Fremont County to Carbon. And of course, you know, Fremont County's got more people in it. I understand that. But I think that that's a discussion we've got to have, Mike.
So
and
I think
we'd
that,
save money.
Sorry to interrupt
No,
you.
go right ahead.
But the issue with Fremont County, and you know, I don't follow this closely enough, and I really should, is that because they're on the reservation, there are issues with federal grants and how to maximize that on the reservation for those kids on a per student basis. That actually reduces the amount of funding that we need to provide as a state. But I don't know the actual specifics around how that works.
All right. Well, let's switch gears here. We've pretty much beaten that horse. So, Karlee, you brought up healthcare. That this is one of the major things that you're hearing at your. All right, Ken. Let's just take a pause right there, because we just spent a lot of time talking about education, and I think that's that's a discussion we're going to have. Like was mentioned several times during our discussion, we're being sued right now by the Wyoming Education Association. But the first judge, and let's just be perfectly honest about what he said. The lawsuit says you're not fully funding education. So the judge says, well, every kid has to have a new computer and you have to hire school resource officers. Okay, well, that's not funding education. That's adding to it. And all right, so technology is a big thing. I get it, but I don't understand why buying each kid another computer, because, by the way, most schools in Wyoming, I don't know about all, but most of them do just about everything off of a Chromebook. In Johnson County, each kid is issued a Chromebook, at least for middle school and probably high school too. So this whole idea that we're being sued because we don't fund education is kind of a canard, because, like you mentioned, Ken, if we don't spend more than every other state, we're in the top, 3 or 5.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in there, kind of put things in perspective. That it's almost 21,000 right now, I believe. That does not include the building, maintenance of that facility.
Yep.
That's different funding.
Transportation, I think we brought that up.
Yeah, the transportation is not other. We're just talking about that. So if you just take, let's say you've got a classroom with 20 kids, and you got a teacher, and let's say that it costs $100,000 to pay that teacher. Not the teacher's going to make that much, but between benefits and whatnot. Okay, where's the rest of that money going?
Exactly.
There are 15 kids in there paying $20,000 a piece. Where does that money go? Well, where it goes is to layer upon layer of administration. That got sideways in Mike Yin's comments, in my view, because what I was talking about is parents and school boards can do a lot of what the administrators are doing now and doing poorly. We need administrators to do a few things, HR and other things like that, certainly.
Yeah, but you don't need, like in Sheridan, and you brought this point up, which I think is a good one. In Sheridan, you have 3 school districts, which means 3 administrators, 3 assistant administrators, 3 deputy assistant administrators, whatever.
They're making 2 or 3 times what a teacher makes.
Yeah.
Okay, we're spending way more than enough to educate Wyoming's children, but we're not able to put the money where we think it should be. Even when we try House Bill 316, we say, let's give this staff a raise. It didn't happen.
Well, and I think that part of the interview was really good, because I said, look, I don't think that you can escape the argument that we gave them enough money and they didn't give a raise. And so there isn't a school district around that can say, well, teachers don't make enough. Well, you had the money. If that was a problem, you had the money given to you by the legislature, you would have given them a raise. And what I've heard from some school administrators trying to back away from that episode, which, by the way, I checked it yesterday. That episode where I broke the story about school boards not giving raises has been looked at 24,000 times, over 24,000 times. And I don't think that you can get away with it. They had the money. And so any discussion of we don't pay teachers enough, that's out the window. That's gone, baby. All right. So one thing I wanted to show you, and then we're going to continue with the interview, but this is a really, really cool tool that everybody in Wyoming can use. It's called the CREW report. It's a report put out by the Wyoming Department of Education. And I don't remember what the acronym CREW stands for. It's CRERW. So go ahead and throw my screen up here, Ken, and we'll just show them. So this is the CREW report, and this is just the opening pages on salaries. But if you look through here, it will list every single school district, every single position, what the funding model says we're supposed to be paying, what the actual salaries are. And in some cases, like if it's in a small school district, you can drill down and find out, how much is that custodian making? How much is, this administrative position paying? How much are we paying the assistant to the assistant to the superintendent, the layer upon layer? So, I mean, this is it's a fun tool for me, but there again, I'm kind of a wonk on this sort of stuff. But you can find out everything you want to know about education funding on that report.
I just kind of go back to brass tacks. If you go back 100, 150 years ago, you had a remote area. The parents would get together. They would hire somebody. They would get together and put together a little building, and the school marm would go down there, and the parents oversaw the instruction and made sure that their kids got an education. And the kids came out of that system able to read and write and understand. It was a good system.
Right.
Then we turn it over to the government, and we're spending gazillions of dollars. And since the Campbell decision, every kid in the state has to have all identical treatment, which is another problem. You know, some people want to live in a remote area, like those people that Karlee mentioned.
Sure.
One of the things about that is, okay, you live out there, you're a little bit of pioneer. You may not, my kids or my parents did that when I was young. I didn't go to school when all the rest of the kids did at 5 years old. I had to wait a couple of years because we lived where it wasn't practical.
Sure.
But anyway, all that to be said, now we've got a 65% success rate, and we're spending all of this. This is a broken system. Mike's not wrong in that the model hasn't been corrected like it's supposed to be done every 5 years. They haven't been able to get it fixed.
But the reason that it's, and this is, you do an interview, and I'm sure that you've had these conversations too. You talk to somebody, and then you walk away, and you're like, dang, I should have said that. Well, that happens with interviews too. And, at least in that segment, one thing I wish I would have said is, wait a minute. So the model is broken. We all agree on that. How we fund schools is not working. So your solution is to pass another law to do it over again?
And throw more money at it. That's always the answer.
Yes.
Whatever's wrong, just throw more money at it.
Okay, one other thing that I wanted to clarify, and then we're going to take another break, and then we'll go back to the interview. But you heard me mention that the Constitution, when we were talking about public lands, that the Constitution only lists a few things that the federal government can own. And I was unable to find that reference in the middle of the interview, but it's in Article 1, Section 8. And let me just read it to you. Just so you know, it says, and I'll read the whole section, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding the 10 square miles, and that's Washington, D.C., as may, by secession of particular states and acceptance of Congress, become the seat of government for the United States. So that's Washington, D.C., to exercise authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state, in which the same shall be, and here's that list I was referring to, for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings, and to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper to carrying out the execution of the foregoing powers. So technically the Constitution only gives the federal government the power to own a few specific things. Now, from way back, way back before Wyoming was ever a state, we weren't really following this because 47% of the state is owned by the federal government. But that's a little bit beyond what the Constitution says. So that's what I was referring to. So, Ken, let's go ahead and take our second break. And then when we come back, we'll continue with the interview. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. I just love what I do for a living, my friends. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Thursday. Kind of a special program today. We've been watching an interview we did yesterday with Representatives Karlee Provenza and Mike Yin. We had them in the studio for the better part of an hour. We covered a wide range of topics, and if you're just now joining us, where we left off was we just finished a discussion of school funding. I thought it was fascinating. And just to quickly review, if you want to find out exactly where we spend all of our money, go search out the CREW report. And it's the acronym is CRERW, and I don't remember what that stands for. But just search for it, Wyoming CRERW report. It'll take you to the Wyoming Department of Education, and you can get lost in finding out how we spend money in education. So let's go ahead and continue with the program. There's lots more left. So Ken, go ahead and hit play, and we'll continue on. Town halls and access to healthcare. I guess my first question is, what specifically are you hearing? And then my second question would be, why is that the role of government?
Yeah. Well, what we've been hearing, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things we could talk about with healthcare. Why does it cost so much to go get services in a hospital? How am I going to afford an ambulance ride if there is one? That's a concern. And then maybe Mike can touch on some more of what we've been hearing specifically. But I've also heard about medical debt, and that's something that I've struggled with. My credit score has been impacted by medical debt. I was sued for owing money to a surgeon because my appendix burst and I couldn't afford to pay. People oftentimes, I think it's 20 points on average, their credit score goes down because of medical debt. And that's something where that's not even me, the government trying to give somebody help financially. That's just, what are we going to do to stop these credit agencies from putting people in a worse place where you get potentially a credit check if you want a job, you get a credit check if you want to maybe rent a place to live. And now I can't have either of those because my credit score is bad because I had a medical procedure that I couldn't afford. Right. So that's something that I think that folks have been concerned about, that we could maybe agree on, that shouldn't impact your credit score.
I would agree. I'm a diabetic, so
Yeah.
I talk to a lot of doctors.
Yeah.
So,
I guess my question too, and it goes into David's question about why is this the proper role of government? Why are medical bills, why are procedures and all these things so blasted expensive?
It's a big
if we
question.
could answer
Yeah,
that question, Ken, that would be...
We could have a 24-hour episode.
Yeah.
We certainly could, but I say
I
that.
hope you brought your pajamas.
Yeah, actually. So, I don't know what your psychology thing would tell you about my reaction to that question. The short answer to me is government got involved and began to mess it up. When we start messing with the free market and tipping the scales in one way, picking winners and losers and moving things around, it throws things out of balance. And I'm convinced if we could go back 100 to 125 years, local doctors would go, they would deliver a baby and take home 6 chickens or something, or 2 chickens. I'm not saying that doctors should only be paid chickens, although some of the doctors I've met don't deserve that. But to me, what I'm getting at is, why does more government solve a problem that government, in my view, screwed up in the first place?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't come prepared to talk about cost of healthcare. I think we can agree there's a problem, right? And I think part of the issue too is that this is a federal problem. This is something that our national government should be tackling and or not tackling, in your opinion. You know, we can disagree on what the solutions are, but we know that there's the same problem. The other issue, Ken, is that we don't work in DC, right? Like, we work here in Wyoming. And so I'm looking at what can I do to help the people in my district. And this is something that I can do in my district, which is and try to help say you're not going to get kicked by anybody just because you couldn't afford a medical bill. And that's a Wyoming thing that we can do that isn't necessarily, I don't think we can solve how much healthcare costs as a state.
So let's say we got rid of all federal regulations around healthcare, and we got rid of all state regulations on healthcare, and just said, market economy completely just for healthcare. Would anyone open a hospital in Wyoming, given that we don't have the population to do it? Maybe not, and probably not in all counties, frankly. Sublette County just is opening their first county hospital, but the only way that they could do it is putting it on the ballot to charge tax to make it happen, right? So the market economics didn't work to have a hospital in Sublette County, so folks had to drive up to Jackson an hour and a half to get services. One of the most expensive services is labor and delivery. Most places in the state don't have labor and delivery services just because it is so darn expensive. So most people go out of state to do it. Who's that hardest for? That's hardest for the Fremont County folks. It's hardest for the Natrona County folks. I think that the reason government got involved is because people want healthcare services in their community. And so how do you deal with that? And then let's add in the fact that, yes, the federal government got involved in healthcare. Even if they did or didn't, we would still have to get involved on the state level to make sure that we have those hospitals and have those services. That's why we have a hospital district in our statute, so people can start up a hospital and understand that their local taxes work to make it exist.
All right, so let me switch topics on you one more time, because we're kind of running a little short on time. Big issue in Wyoming, certainly in your district, Mike, is affordable housing, so-called affordable housing. I think it's probably an issue just about everywhere. Even if you go to Buffalo, Wyoming, you're going to pay, $1,000, $1,200 a month for a crappy apartment. So I know you guys argue for that a lot. Why don't you give me the argument why the state should be involved in affordable housing?
I don't think I need to provide you with an argument of why we should get involved. I mean, what we're trying to do with the listening sessions is hear what are the issues that people are telling us. And again, we don't have to agree on what that solution is, right? We don't have to agree that one solution for one community even works for the same community. But what we are hearing is that people are worried about the cost of housing, and they're worried that young people are leaving because we aren't able to make sure that they can afford a home when they can, right? So a lot of people in my community don't own homes. Several of them are literally homeless. They live out of vans, they take a shower in the rec center, and they still have 3 jobs just to keep up with that opportunity. But they burn out before they get to 30, and they decide that they have to leave anyway. So we end up having this rotating cast of 20-somethings because no one can necessarily afford to live here. But then you get lucky people who can qualify for those housing, and they win the lottery, so they're able to put their feet down and say, yes, this is a place that I can live long term, or yes, this is at least a starter home, and then maybe I can gain enough equity so I can move up to another home in the future. Especially that starter home area, I think one is a part that we're really lacking in the state, where most people here can't buy their first homes. Something that 2 realtors told me in Teton County is that 70% of our purchases are cash only. So that means people are paying an average $4 million home
in cash. Teton County is amazing.
So then how do we make sure we have workers? I would love to hear how we solve that problem. I mean, maybe you could suggest we build a skyrise? I don't know, but that's not what I'm going to be advocating for.
Well, my answer to that would be let the free market handle it, right? So if you're the guy that owns a business that employs, let's say, 10 people, well, the market's got to be able. I mean, it's got to be able to support you supporting those workers, and if it's not going to, then you're going to find a way to do it. And let me just give you an example that's outside of Teton County. We've got a lot of communities like Sheridan, we've got a couple of pretty big businesses here. Weatherby is one of them. Okay, well, you're not going to move a big factory into a community unless you have the workforce to support it, that there's housing for it, or for your workers. And that you can run your business. And so your options are either A, pay people, enough money to where they can live there and work in your factory, or B, you build your own housing. And I think that this is another area again where, we get government in there that monkeys with the problem. And, we could talk about the WCDA or the Wyoming Business Council. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time for that. But I really think that you let the free market handle it. And if your business owner needs employees, they'll figure out a way to do it.
My concern, though, is that the free market's not doing it. So and I've worked with people in my community that live in mobile homes, right? And their rent goes up quarterly. 3-4 times a year. Their rent for the ground.
I do think that's criminal, by the way.
I do too. I mean, if I live under the commandment to love my neighbor, and I want to make sure that my neighbor can have a place to live and food on the table, and the free market's not solving it, am I going to throw my hands up in the air and let them live out in the snow all year? So I don't believe in that. I believe that what we need to do is ensure that those people have some way, because these people work hard, and in return they get what? I wish the companies would take care of it, but the reality is that they are not doing it. I think that companies right now are feeling pressed from inflation, and whatever else. People are potentially going through a recession right now. So when companies can't afford to make sure that their workers are paid enough, then what do we do? And for me, I believe what the government's role is to make sure that we help people access the dignity that they deserve. And that means people that live in mobile homes. That means people that don't have housing, that live in vans. That means people that just work their tail off, and it's just not enough anymore.
So I think that you both have kind of touched on some of this. I see government as the problem as well. And one of the reasons that private industry isn't doing it is because that's what the government does. And if we knew for certain government's going to do nothing, they're going to be out of there. Now there's this period of adjustment. And that period of adjustment is, I would liken it to coming down off of drugs. It's going to be very painful. We are addicted to government spending, especially federal spending. And now is the current
state spending too, Ken.
Oh, I know. But and that's why I said government spending to begin with. But as the federal government begins to cut back to the one beautiful bill and the other things that are happening with the current administration, which can turn around on a dime, next election, we begin looking at, we don't have enough money to fix everything. And so my view, and it's hard, is we need to get government out of the way, let things settle back into a natural stasis. And the problem is it's going to hurt in the meantime. It's like going into withdrawal. And if we keep going the way we're going, our spending is unsustainable, both at the federal and the state level. So what's the answer?
Ken,
where does it break?
Go ahead, Mike.
I mean, when we're talking about spending, that bill increased the debt, increased the federal debt by a significant amount, a very large amount.
I'm not arguing.
Right?
I'm not arguing.
So I actually don't think it really helped, frankly, overall. But let's forget about the federal government, right? So local government, right? We're talking about why doesn't Jackson just get out of the housing market? our community, I think it's like 10 or 20 years, maybe 20 years, does a comprehensive planning process. And that the goal of that is to get the whole community in, talk about what does the community want for its goals. One of the goals that it set for itself is having 60% of the workforce live in the valley. What happens if we just say free market? What will happen is that the whole valley will just be second homes. It'll just be second homes. Every worker will just live outside of the county. So you'll have all of the workers in Idaho, you'll have all of the workers flood Alpine, you'll have all of the workers flood Pinedale or Bondurant. And so I don't think that that's something that the community wanted. And clearly it's not, because through the comprehensive planning process, the community has said, we want 60% of the workforce to be there. The companies could set up their workers in Idaho. That's totally plausible, and many of our workers do live in Idaho. But the community has said we want 60% in town for a variety of reasons. And so that's the reason we want a community that isn't just second homes, right? We want a community that actually has a variety of people that isn't just rich people.
And
So,
quite frankly,
go
I
ahead.
mean, sorry to
No, it's
interrupt
all
you,
right. Go
but
ahead.
like, if people are buying $4 million homes in cash, and I might catch on fire when I say this in this room, maybe they should have to pay a tax. Yeah.
Well,
I
I
know.
mean, I think I've talked about this with Representative Pendergraft about, and I brought this bill several times about having a sales tax on purchases. It's never gotten very far.
So to be clear, I think that the government taxes way too much. However, I happen to be in favor of a community deciding to tax themselves. Now, I think that there's several caveats with that you have to respect the rights of everybody that lives in there, right? Like you can't vote yourself the ability to take somebody else's rights away. I mean, it's unconstitutional. There's so many problems with it. But
We learned some lessons about that.
yeah, and one of the here it comes. So are you telling me that one of the solutions, like in Teton County, is housing mitigation fees? I mean, there's private property concerns there. There's a whole bunch of stuff there.
So I had a bill that was literally a 1% sales tax on properties and have that build housing, right? So we have fees on how do you make sure that you have enough infrastructure, right? So whether it's water or road infrastructure, those are fees on development. When you develop out here in Sheridan County, or you develop in Cheyenne. And so those fees go to build roads, they go to build water. How is it different to make sure that you have workers that live in your valley? That there's a mitigation to understand that the reason that you're creating this demand for new workers, if you have a community that says 60% of your workers need to live in the valley, we need to mitigate for this new demand for workers for every second home that gets built. That is, again, the median value for these homes is $4 million.
Right, but that's money that people have earned, and if they're willing to pay $4 million in cash, I guess my response to your question would be, because you can't infringe on somebody's private property rights in order to provide public housing for somebody else.
But you can for roads. Is that your argument? Because we do it for roads,
so
right?
that's a different question.
Is it?
Yes, it is, because you're talking about like the essential functions of government, right? To provide infrastructure, but you're not stealing without just compensation somebody's private property, which their money is their private property. All right, so I've got one more question for you, and I'm watching the clock because I know you guys got to go have dinner and then go to your town hall. And I just want to hit the nail on the head. We're living in a time in our country where there's a lot of stuff that's said in the media. And I think we can probably all agree that some of it is pretty hyperbolic. We'll use that term. Some of it is pretty nasty and mean. And to some degree, many of us, myself included, probably contribute to that, though I would argue not necessarily as bad. So Mike, here's my question for the two of you. How do we turn the volume knob down a little bit?
I wrote an op-ed. I
actually liked it, by the way.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, the basis of it is I think we should just remember that we are neighbors, right? We live in the same community, even though we could have different beliefs. The fact that we are neighbors means that we should be working together and finding those common problems, right? And that's something that we're doing across the whole state. So whether it's Jackson or Cheyenne or Sheridan or Rock Springs, there are common issues that we can work together to solve rather than attack each other on trying to figure out how to solve. And I think, part of the reason that we have this democratic republic that we live in today is because our founders wanted a way to figure out how to solve our problems without a revolution every 50 years or so or whatever, like in that form. And so all of that is to say, remember that we're all Americans, we're one country, and that we can solve our problems without pouring lighter fluid on the temperature.
Well said. What do you think, Karlee?
Since 2020, the amount of time that we spend with people in person has decreased by more than 50%. People are on those boxes constantly, and they're being told to be outraged and angry, and that there is just a right or a wrong, there's an us and a them. And when people ask me, like, what can I do? Tangibly, I tell people, you need to have dinner with your neighbors. And we start with the people that we know, that we have relationships with, and we learn how to be in disagreement without hating each other. We used to be able to disagree and still love each other. And I think that some of us are still able to do that. And some days it's harder than others to love my neighbor, right? Well, moment to moment, sometimes it's harder to love my neighbor, but it's incredibly important that we come back to being in community with each other, that we're having meals, and that we don't stop with the people that we agree with. I need to be having more dinners with people like Ken to ensure that we're working towards a better, brighter future for tomorrow, because I'm so tired of being told that I need to be angry and that I need to hate my opposition. So staying away from words like enemy and embracing things like loving our neighbor despite our differences is really critically important. And food helps people do that.
I think that was pretty well done. Depending on your neighbors, you might include beer or not.
We're all neighbors in this state, Ken.
Yeah.
If you like beer, he's the guy to talk to.
Yeah.
There are some state legislatures where, part of their before session festivities is actually getting everyone together to have a meal together. And that might be a good tradition to adopt here.
I think what we've proven here today, and I really appreciate you guys coming, to be able to sit down and talk like adults about hard issues. There are no quick, easy answers. And we may not necessarily agree on what caused the issue or how to get out of it, but we're never going to get anywhere if we can't sit in the same room and be sociable, have a laugh. I especially like the laugh part. You probably figured that out about me.
I've never heard you tell a joke.
Except on
Not all the
floor.
way through. I deserve
Usually gets
that.
gabbled down.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what I would say is that our republic, thank you for using the word republic, Mike.
Democratic Republic. 2 words.
Especially Democrats.
Hey, well.
All of
but-
that, again, it doesn't have to be taking sides. It doesn't have to be taking sides.
But our republic was designed to be raucous. That it was, I think, from the very beginning, in many ways, perhaps it was intentional to have vigorous debates, and I think that that's the way that we come to, solutions to solve problems. But I think one of the things that we can do is what we're doing right now. I mean, I guarantee you there's probably, and I think we've found some middle ground on a couple of things, maybe. But to be able to, like you said, sit down, have a discussion, and at the end of it, be able to stand up and shake hands. So thank you very much for joining us in the studio. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Perhaps if the only thing we got done is to be able to sit down and have a conversation. So last question, you guys are having a town hall tonight. This will be published afterwards, but I guess tell people where to go.
So we're having a town hall at Carney Hall in Banner at 6:30. But tomorrow we're going to be in Cody, and Cody will be at 6 p.m. at the Cody Library, Grizzly Hall, I believe. And then October 17th, I think, I'm almost positive that's the right date. We're going to be in the middle of Wyoming, so Worland, Bighorn, Washakie County, and Hot Springs County are getting together, and we're going to have a listening session in that area.
Is there a
state.
website or someplace where these things are posted, like a tour?
Unfortunately, right now, it's really just been on our social media. So feel free to follow us or don't follow us, but find it. But for the folks who are in Park County or in those other 3 counties, the county Dems definitely have it on their social media, so you can take a look at it. And again, you don't have to be a Democrat, and I actually don't want only Democrats there. I want the whole community there, no matter what your party or if you're independent, et cetera. We want to hear what the pulse of Wyoming actually is.
Okay. Now, if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Our number and email is on the wyoledge.gov website. I think one of the benefits of having such a small population state is that each of us are very easy to get a hold of. So don't hesitate to give us a call or send us an email.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Don't forget to love your neighbor.
All right. Well, there you have it. The interview with Karlee Provenza and Mike Yin in the studio. Just kind of generally speaking, thank you to both of them for sitting down. Maybe the only thing that we proved yesterday is that we can sit down and have a discussion. Though, if you'll notice, we didn't really agree on a whole heck of a lot. And, a lot of times it's just the discussion that matters. But there are a couple of things that I think we definitely need to point out there. I lost count how many times we asked them, why is that the proper role of government? I mean, why should government get involved in housing or healthcare or any of those things? And I think what became clear is the Democrat solution to problems is more government. Our solution is government created the problem in the first place. So maybe if you get government out of the way, that the problem will solve itself. And the perfect example of that is so-called affordable housing. Let the free market work. If there is a need, the free market will provide it. And a good example of that is happening in Du Bois right now. Now, there's 2 sides to this, but there was a discussion. Hey, we need a motel. And what did Dan Stark, the guy that owns the military museum over there, do? He says, "I'll build one." But that's how it works, right? If you own a big business and you want to move into a town, well, you got to have employees, and you got to have a place for those employees to live. And so if there isn't one of those, you have to provide it. Another good example, there's a couple of different businesses in Buffalo, of all places, where the business owner owns a couple of houses, and his employees live in those houses. And so if you just get government out of the way, the free market will provide. And it became very clear to me through the town hall last night that I attended and through our discussion that Democrats and those people on the left, the rhinos, redcoats, a lot of them really don't believe in the free market. They do, but they want government to control it, which again is not the free market. But
Yeah, there's this knee-jerk idea that if there's a societal ill, then government's the answer. And generally, that government is the same thing. Reagan said it best, and government's not the solution, it's the problem.
well, the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
I think if you're watching this thing and you were tempted several times to say, why didn't somebody say, that is excellent, that's good.
Yes.
Number one, we didn't want to squash everything. We want them to speak their mind
Sure.
and feel comfortable. We want them to come back. And Mike and Karlee, I hope you do. And next time, Karlee, I'll spell your name right.
Yeah, good job, 29.
I sincerely apologize for that. I actually know better. But there's so much of a difference in just basic concept, which becomes more and more evident. And I think this was a good exercise in that. I'm pleased that we had the ability to laugh. For example, I don't know if people know this, but sometimes during downtime on the House floor, people get up and recite poetry or tell a joke or something. And I got up to tell a joke, same joke that I've told 100 times other places, and just trashed it. And that's part of what brought that back. But we can find common ground. We can respect each other, and then we can fight it out. But the more clear we are on both sides of saying what we stand for, then the better chance the people will actually get what they deserve or what they vote for or what they want. What frustrates me to no end, and I would not have near as easy a time as sitting here with several of the rhinos, is somebody that comes home, like my
Yes,
predecessor did,
the
and
redcoats.
says, hey, how about them Republicans? We're so great, rah, rah, shish, boom, bah, I'm one of you, and then goes down there and votes the other way. That is what is destroying this conversation. These Democrats, they have different ideas. I disagree with them, but they stand on their own 2 feet.
Yes.
And they say, this is what I believe. And more power to you, buddy.
Yeah, and I've said, and I wish I would have brought this up during the interview, but funny story. I think I was in Jackson for an event. There was a local GOP event that I attended, and I'm talking with one of a person who he is an admitted crossover voter, and he tells me, well, I joined the Republican Party just so I could vote for Liz Cheney, and I say, well, why don't you go back? Go back to your party. And he says, well, no, I want to have a say in the primary election. I said, well, and I started to tell him, look, the problem here is that we don't have clear distinctions between parties. Is that you're a Democrat, you're an admitted Democrat, you joined the Republican Party just so you can participate in a party election. And if you stayed in your own party, then we could perhaps come to a solution. But a lot of these folks don't want to do that, like your predecessor. And there's a whole bunch of redcoats down there. Well, during the middle of this conversation, Mike Yin walks up, and I make the comment, and I didn't see him. I make the comment, look, I like the Democrats way more than I like the redcoats, because at least with the Democrats, you know who you're dealing with, that they're Democrats. It doesn't mean that they're not good politicians. It doesn't mean that they're not in favor of universal basic income and, taxing the bejesus out of you. It doesn't mean they're not in favor of all of that, but at least you know that. With the redcoats, you don't, because just like Ken said, they come to your doorstep and they say things like, abortion is bad. I love my guns. Gosh, taxes are too high. I'm a conservative, and so you should vote for me. And because in Wyoming, we're a pretty trusting bunch, we do that. We go to the poll and we fill in that little circle for them. And then these folks go down to Cheyenne and they vote exactly the opposite of what they told you. But it's actually worse than that, because, again, like Agent 29 said, these folks come home and they get on your radio station and they talk to your newspaper reporter and they say, we really tried hard on that bill that we talked about. We really tried, but we just didn't have the votes. And by golly, we'll hit her back next session, when in reality, they're the folks that probably tanked it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. I'm going to open up the phone lines, and we'll finish out the program. So if you want to call in and be part of the show, if you want to comment on the interview that we just finished up, feel free to do that. I'll have the phone lines open here in just a second. So we'll go to the break, and when we come back, hopefully we'll take some of your calls.
Ever since gold backing was removed from the dollar, the value has dropped significantly over the past few decades. Experts say this is one of the main reasons goods are more expensive and your savings are worth less each year. How would you know how many dollars to save for retirement if the valuation of the dollar changes over time? Would you work all week for that $20 gold piece? Let's look at the valuation of this coin from the 1970s to today. When President Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, this coin traded for about $275. Today, it trades for about $14,000. Buying and holding rare coins using only a fraction of your portfolio is our suggested way to save for the future. Call U.S. Coin Capital at 1-800-878-2646 to get your free United States Gold and Silver Buyer's Guide.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Welcome to Lessons in Civility by Morton Buildings. Gentlemen, is your garage completely jam-packed full of all of your unnecessary crap? And your lovely wife has been on your tail, nagging you nonstop to clean it out? It's not because she just wants to incessantly irritate you. Chivalry dictates that you should clear out a space so she can park her car inside and you don't end up sleeping on the couch anymore. To do that, contact Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Not only are they the experts in metal building construction, they're also skilled at keeping you out of the doghouse. One more time, their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. This has been Lessons in Civility from Morton Buildings. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Thursday. We just finished up what I thought was a pretty, I guess productive might be a good word, but an interview with Representatives Karlee Provenza and Mike Yin. And I think we've learned, at least where they're coming from. And so if you want to call in and be part of the show, maybe you want to comment on what we just played for you, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. So let's go ahead and talk to our pal Jerry. Jerry, what'd you think of the interview, my friend?
I thought it was really good. I didn't agree with one side pretty much, but it's what we've been hearing for 40 years. So the discussion was great. The responses were really good. They weren't fabricated. I believe it's both sides said exactly how they felt. The one that hit me most was Democratic Republic. We are a constitutional republic.
I know.
But I think it was a really good platform.
Yeah, and I think and I've often said, actually I said this before the break, that I much prefer dealing with the Democrat than I do a redcoat, because at least you know who the Democrats are. And I think that it was pretty clear the divide we have between conservatives and the redcoats and the Democrats. We're the people that think get government out of the way and the free market and our Constitution will solve everything. And, well, they're the people that think that more government is always the solution, which I think we have a lot of evidence that the more money we spend, the bigger our problems get.
And that was a point that I believe was well made.
Well, I appreciate the call, Jerry. And you know, I mean, hopefully we have Karlee and Mike back on. And you know, like we said right at the end of the show, I one of the ways that we get back to being able to have a debate and to be able to talk about things is to do exactly what we did: sit down, we'll disagree, and we'll do it respectfully.
And I have one more point.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. How can you respect a red coat rhino? I can respect anyone's opinion, but I no longer respect the lies and the backstabbing that we get from the red coat rhinos. And God bless our republic.
Yes, sir. Thanks for the call, Jerry.
Our constitutional republic.
Constitutional republic. Yes, sir. Have a good weekend, my friend, and we'll be back. Hopefully we'll talk to you when we come back. So that was Jerry. If you want to be part of the program, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989. If you want to talk about the discussion with Provenza and Yin, go ahead and give me a call. You know, and one of the things that really struck me, and I didn't bring it up during the interview, is Representative Provenza said, you know, I'm tired of being told to hate people. Well, I don't know that there's a single person that I know of that has told people, hey, you have to hate the other side. I don't think that I've ever heard that. I know that I've never said that. I do think that there are a significant number of things that, yeah, you should be pretty angry about. One of those would be your local school board not giving the teachers and staff a raise. And then all the time complaining that, well, we don't have enough money to pay our teachers, and we're not getting enough teachers because we don't have enough money. That argument's out the window because they had enough money and they didn't give a raise. And so, yeah, if you're a teacher or you work for the school district, if you're the custodian that's there until 9, 10 o'clock at night cleaning that school so the students can have a nice, clean environment, you should be pretty pissed that your school board was instructed, or I mean, as much as the legislature can instruct a school district, but was basically instructed to say, give these people an 8.5% raise, and they didn't do it. I think that you are absolutely entitled to be a little bit angry about that.
When Karlee made that comment, you came out and you said, you know, I might be one of those people that has at times inflamed or, you know.
Sure. I was hoping that maybe they would
some
say
responsibility. And I kept thinking it would be nice if she would come back and say, yeah, I shouldn't have posted Antifa.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, that was,
you know, I'm not going to drive that home and make a big issue of that because that's how we put the walls back up and quit talking. But
and that's a point I wanted to make, is that, you know, I don't think that I've ever told anybody you need to hate the other side. In fact, I'm sure that I've never said that. But yeah, you do have the right to be angry at a lot of these things. You know, and another one too that it really irritates me is that we hear politicians say all the time, well, we're not going to have this service or that service, or we don't have enough money for this or that. Well, you got $30 billion in the bank. And for I don't know how many years, you put hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank account for I don't have any idea what. I mean, I don't know why, what we need $30 billion for, but it's there. And yet any discussion of lowering taxes is anathema to a lot of these people. I think you should be kind of angry about that because there's a lot of people that really, really, really struggle to pay their property taxes.
Look at the County Commissioners Association right now talking about all the things we've had to cut out. You know, Hot Springs County, we had to shut down libraries and all that because we have critical needs. Yeah, and when you look at what they were actually cut, 3, 4, 5, 6%.
Exactly.
What budget can't take a measure like that? And how many of them have reserves? And they're taking a cut off of what is it, the peak of where monies have been in years. So much of it is disingenuous, and that's what we can't have an honest discussion with somebody that won't tell the truth and that reacts in that way.
Okay, now to that point, Ken, I think that our two guests on the show, I think they were perfectly honest. I think they were open about what they believe, and thank you to both of them for doing that. Now, do we agree? No. No. But yeah, at least they were honest about, who they are and what they believe. And I thought that came through pretty clearly. But again, we don't agree with it. But if you're going to have a discussion, you got to have an honest broker. And if somebody's not willing to do that, well, then, I mean, that's the big problem with redcoats right there.
Yeah, the last thing I'd like to mention is when you listen to Mike, much of the things that he talked about were unique to Teton County.
Oh, yeah.
And there's kind of a plea all over that we need to tax the whole state so that we can take care of our problems here. That is a little troublesome to me. And you aptly pointed out, you can't take from one person to give to another. Why should people in Washakie County have to pay for your problems? So there's that. But it is a warning to all of us because all of us tend to see the world through our own eyes and think every place is just like we are here.
It's not.
No, they're decidedly different. I've lived in Washakie County, for example. I've lived in Hot Springs County, lived in many of the counties. And I've also lived in Teton County. And it's a very different world, especially now. And we need to understand, and I appreciated that. I appreciated the comments of Gabe Saint. Things from his perspective are very different
Very
than
much
they
so.
are from mine. And we're basically on the same side. So Karlee was right. We need to be able to sit down together, have dinner. I appreciated her comments about, everybody's stuck on the box. I didn't agree that we're all being told to hate. Maybe they are on that side, but on our side, we're not. But we just need to try to have a little bit of empathy for where somebody else is coming from. And then the principles, the underlying principles, the free market versus government's the solution to everything, then they start to come into play. And when those are clearly laid out, the voters will have the opportunity to choose one of the two, and the most popular should win.
Well, and that's the theory. Now, one thing that you brought up, Ken, is that, a lot of the things that Representative Yin talked about were unique to Teton County. But one thing, let's not lose sight of this. Taxpayer money did pay for so-called affordable housing in Teton County. They went to the SLIB board. It was Kangaroo, Mike Giroux, and Luther Probst were in front of the SLIB board. And yeah, I mean, taxpayers did pay for so-called affordable housing. And if there's one place in the entire country, in the entire United States, where the folks that live there could pay for whatever they want, their comprehensive plan or whatever, it's there. I mean, that's the one place where, for some of those folks, it would not hurt them one iota to throw $5 million at an apartment building. But you notice that they're not doing that because government is involved. And if you get government out of the way, then you and I and Ken and everybody else that doesn't live in Teton County, we're not going to be paying for it. And we shouldn't, by the way. That's not the proper role of government. So anyway, I'm going to leave the phone lines open for the rest of the show. If you want to be part of the conversation, give me a call, 307-374-8989.
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but you have a video over here that has Kamala on there. And I'm actually kind of anxious to see that because she is the end result of the path
of that thinking.
That thinking, yeah. And no, I don't like listening to Kamala.
Oh, it's a great video. We'll go ahead and play it here in just a second. But, there's this theory and I'm assuming this originated with the Democrats, but if you're going to run for president, your vice president has to be dumber than you are. And so, Bill Clinton and Al Gore, clearly Al Gore, the Earth has a fever guy. Wait a minute, I have an Al Gore soundbite. Here we go.
This is going on right now. The planet has a fever. If your baby...
And then, of course, there's Barack Obama, and his vice president has to be dumber than him, and that's Joe Biden. And then Joe Biden, he had to have a vice president that's dumber than him, and that's Kamala Harris.
Yeah, Barack Obama, he of the well-pleated pants who wanted to fundamentally change the greatest nation on earth.
Darn, he made some strides doing that. So the video that I've got, so Kamala Harris has got this new book out, and it's called 107 Days. I'm not going to torture myself reading it. I did that once. I read a book from a Democrat politician, and I wish everybody else would have read it too, because we never would have elected Barack Obama. But so Kamala Harris is out. She's doing this book tour and proving to all of us why she didn't win. Go ahead and play the video.
Joining us now for her first news interview since the election is former Vice President Kamala Harris. Madam Vice President, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
It's good to see you.
It's good to be here. We used to compare the strength of our democracy to communist dictators. That's what we're dealing with right now in Donald Trump.
You say in the book really bluntly that your personal first choice for your running mate would have been Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah.
And to say that he couldn't be on the ticket effectively because he was gay, it's hard to hear.
No. That's not what I said. That he couldn't be on the ticket because he is gay. I was clear that to be a black woman running for president of the United States and as a vice presidential running mate, a gay man, with the stakes being so high, it made me very sad, but I also realized it would be a real risk. Democracy sustains capitalism. Capitalism thrives in a democracy.
Arguably the fastest rising star right now in Democratic politics is Zoran Mamdani. Do you endorse his candidacy?
I support the Democrat in the race. Sure. The folks used to say, don't fall for the okie doke. It ended up being the closest presidential election in the 21st century.
The closest one.
Vice President Harris, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Michael. It's good to be with you. It was the closest presidential election in the 21st century. So you are an athlete. You may appreciate this kind of metaphor. Running for president of the United States is like being in a marathon at a sprinter's pace with people throwing tomatoes at you every step you take. When I'm out and about, I can't tell you the number of people that come up to me crying.
Please welcome Kamala Harris.
Well, you know, a lot of people are coming up to me crying, actually.
Crying, yeah.
We had never talked about election
It
night.
felt traumatic.
It was that traumatic. We had never talked about election night. My poor husband, so he didn't want to put that on me.
I can't take this anymore. It goes on for a couple of minutes. So just to give you one more reason to be happy for where we're at, I go and throw my screen up there, Ken. Our Pete versus their Pete. Thank God in heaven the election turned out the way that it did. I mean, this is a perfect example of, and I'm not saying anything negative about Pete Buttigieg. I'm just saying that I much prefer Pete Hegseth to their version. God help us. But anyway, my friends, you know, when we talk about conservatism, we need to be very clear about why we believe the things that we believe, and don't just throw around words that, oh, conservatism is better. And you might think that, well, you know, David, you do that a lot on the program, but I provide you the argumentation behind it. You know, a good example during the interview was the housing mitigation fees. And Mike Yen says, well, yeah, but isn't that the same thing as streets and water lines? And I gave him two arguments. No, it's not, because one is the essential functions of government, providing a street and water. The other one is you're taking somebody else's property and giving it to somebody else. I mean, conservatism is the answer, my friends. It's not more government.
I also saw in that argument a little bit of the idea that he equates workers to infrastructure.
Yeah, that was kind of, I mean, I thought that they were...
That's ominous in my view.
I thought they were all about microaggressions and not implying things. But, you know, and I don't want to, you know, delve too deeply into the underlying motivations of that argument. But think about that, right? That, well, you know, somebody else's money that they've worked hard for, perhaps saved their whole life for, that's government's money. I mean, that's the implication that I took out. But why shouldn't I be able to take your hard-earned money and build so-called affordable housing?
So let's look at that for a second. You tax other people to build affordable housing so that the wealthy business owners don't have to do it. And we end up paying so that they can get richer, which is exactly the opposite of what they would purport to say.
I know. It is so, and that's the twisted logic behind the Democrats. You know, none of it ever really comes out to, you know, one end terminal argument. It's all twisted, right? So, you know, we can, and you heard me say, and maybe I should clarify this. You heard me say during the interview, you know what? I'm okay with people taxing themselves. And what I mean by that is I am totally fine if there's a community, Sheridan, Buffalo, Thermopolis, Worland, whatever, if they want to build something in their community, they should put it on the ballot, right? If the community decides that, okay, yeah, we want to improve this building, or we want to build a swimming pool or whatever. Doesn't really matter what the project is. Put it on the ballot. Let the people that live there decide whether they're going to pay taxes or not. But when you've got people in some far-flung capital, and Cheyenne is pretty far-flung. I've got to drive there this afternoon. When they're deciding that
it's in a whole other state,
it is a whole state of mind anyway. But when you have somebody else deciding that you're going to pay taxes and then take that money, and it's not, in some cases, it's just theft. Taxation without representation is theft. Taxation with taking people's private money, private property, and using it for somebody else, that's theft too. And there's a lot of daylight between the Democrat argument and conservatism. Conservatism, free market. The free market will provide. If there is a need, there will be a solution. And if there isn't a solution there, then either A, you've got too much government, or B, you don't really have to solve that problem in the future. Now, the reverse of that is an example I've used from Johnson County a lot. Years ago, Buffalo decided, well, we need a business park. If we have a business park, businesses will move in and they'll build this great factory. So we spent tens of millions of dollars on this business park, and to date, not a single business has set up shop there. Now, it's a pretty nice road, and if you go over there right now, it's probably still blocked off, and it's this cool, curvy road. It's out by the shooting range, and the only thing that it has produced is a couple of bales of hay. Government is not the solution to whatever problem you think. Government is the problem. It's like Ronaldus Magnus said, that you get government out of the way and, problems will solve themselves. So the free market will solve them. All right. So I want to give you kind of an update where the program's going in the next couple of days. Tomorrow, we will not have a show. I've got to meet a friend of ours who's been deployed overseas for a year, and she's coming home sometime this weekend. Don't know exactly when, which is why we're leaving today. And so we'll be back next Tuesday. And I think, Ken, you are out of pocket next week.
I will be there Tuesday, I believe, if I'm right. And then from then on, for the next couple of weeks, actually, I'm sorry, folks, I do have other responsibilities, and they're going to take me
hogwash.
They're going to take me all over Wyoming. I actually get to go to, I say get to with tongue in cheek because I've been there several times and I don't like it, is New Orleans. Got a meeting down there, Nolens. Yeah, got to go to Nolens and come on back. But I will miss you guys. I will probably miss David after a week or so.
Yeah, after maybe 2 weeks. So Wednesday through Friday next week, and probably the whole next week, will be in the original Cowboy State Politics studio. But don't worry, never fear, my friends. I will not leave you, except for right now. So from the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. We'll see you next week, my friends. Have a good weekend.